I never didn't believe in Bigfoot. I never believed in it, I didn't believe in it. I never gave it any thought.
They kept wood knocking back and forth to each other, and it was in a pattern.
Barn owls don't typically throw rocks.
I come across these tracks.
Sasquatch is still not on my mind.
We're live here with Dale Kaczmarek, longtime paranormal investigator and researcher. Began his paranormal journey in 1975 and co-founded his first ghost hunting organization in 1977. Mr. Kaczmarek also is a published paranormal author with over half a dozen books to his resume. Lastly, but not least, he's appeared on several paranormal and science TV shows and radio shows, including our favorite Coast to Coast. You can find everything you need to know about him. He's got a very extensive website, probably the most extensive behind like Google and Wikipedia, ghostresearch.org. Yeah, that's a lot of information on that website. I spent some time on it today. Pretty neat. All right, so Dale, let's talk about your ghost hunting. I don't want to say ghost hunting because that's kind of disrespectful. Your paranormal investigation backstory. How you got started, where it all began?
Sure. I mean, I actually got started back in the mid-1970s with a bunch of like-minded individuals that were just kind of interested in just kind of looking into ghost stories around the Chicagoland area. There's a lot of very famous ghost stories that permeate the southwest side of the city of Chicago. And prior to that, I was actually in the Army from 1972 to 74 as a chaplain's assistant. So I actually had a chance to kind of talk to some of the more open-minded chaplains about ghosts, and that was really kind of interesting conversations I had with them. But about a couple of years after, I started this group initially called the Ghost Trackers Club. Again, it was a bunch of like-minded individuals. We had no paranormal gear per se. This is, you got to remember, this is the mid-1970s. Mm-hmm. And so basically, we just started looking into, at that point, I don't even think the World Wide Web was even up at that point. I think we had what was called BBSs, Bulletin Board Services. Mm-hmm. I actually had a lot of snail mail that came through my P.O. box in Oak Lawn. And that's how I got information from people about their ghost stories, their personal encounters and everything. And we tried to investigate them as best we could with what we had, which was basically a 35 millimeter camera, a cassette tape recorder, and my EMF meter was an ordinary compass. So that's really very rudimentary ghost hunting or investigating gear at that point. And then, of course, later on, as I was able to acquire more and more equipment, it got easier. And now people to this day, they build specifically equipment for for projects and for ghost research.
I think my favorite new ghost research tool is the cat toy. You talk about a very niched item that they really found their purpose for. You know, I'm talking about the little cat toy that they knock and turns on.
It's activated by motion and so forth. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've used that a few times actually ourselves. Unfortunately, it never actually moved for us or lit up. Maybe the ghost that was there didn't have sufficient energy to move that ball or to impart energy to it. But we've had devices like motion sensors go off, passive infrared motion sensors. We've had laser grids. Blot out some of the dots and so forth from that. We've also had some more of the high tech gear like the SLS XCam that It's produced by digital dowsing. They were the first to do that. This where it produces like a grid of invisible dots in front of you, and if there's something that shows up or breaks the dots, it shows up as a stick figure. We've actually had several of those actually show up, which is actually cool, even in doorways where there's nothing that could cause a matrixing or a false reading.
So those things, with the one you're talking about, the invisible dots, I was on the fence about them until I talked to a lady from just up the road in Tennessee. She had put one on in somebody's house that was supposedly had some activity, and they look at it, and it's kind of early in the show to go this kind of route, but she said that she looked at that. What's it called? What's the machine called?
Yeah, SLS.
SLS machine. She said the SLS was picking up the figure, the dots, and it was like a man pleasuring himself, like very vividly. And ever since that, I was like, well, maybe there is something, because that's not something that's just going to occur naturally in nature on somebody's love seat.
Yeah, we actually had that happen to our crew when we were in the Crown Point jail where John Dillinger escaped. We went in there with a team of a bunch of us, about 5 or 6 of us went in there, and there were 2 females that went in there. And this pretty much, in the section we were in, was pretty much an all male section. And we actually did find a stick figure actually doing that same thing with those women right there. Yeah.
Okay, so Crown Point Jail is in Crown Point, Indiana?
Correct.
That's where my great-grandma lived. Crazy. She lived in Crown Point in Plymouth.
Okay.
So Dale, I'm kind of curious, going back to your history, you said you were in the military for 2 years. Just for 2 years, and then you branched off from there for other reasons that were ghost related, or just something else?
Well, I was drafted in '72, so I just fresh out of high school, pretty much about a year after high school. The draft was still going on until I think the '70s, and in fact, they were still sending people to Vietnam as late as 1973. So I initially thought that that's where I was going. But I ended up going to Fort Polk, Louisiana, ended up being a chaplain's assistant, and requested a permanent party right there. So after the 2 years there, I spent a couple of years in the military reserve. And then, of course, you have 2 years of inactive reserve. So, and they never called me up for that. But
it's about 6 to 8 years total?
It's a 6-year commitment, basically. Okay. It's 2 years active, 2 years active Army, 2 years active reserve, and 2 years inactive reserve.
And then you branched out from there. And
then I just, basically came home and started, working on getting a job and, buying a house and things of that nature, like all people do.
Did that influence you at all with your ghost research, or it was just something that had to be done and you just moved on from it?
You mean being in the Army, that is?
Yeah.
Well, like I said in the beginning of the show, I did end up becoming a chaplain's assistant, and there were several chaplains that I consider them very pious. They really kind of was, I hate to say the word, but hardliner. They just kind of stayed their course. They were very pious. Or others that were younger, they were a little bit more open-minded. That we actually had conversations about spirits and ghosts and so forth. And you got to remember the Catholic religion, they have the ritual Romano that they use for exorcisms and so forth, and you read about that in literature and sometimes on television, which I always tell people, just be careful what you see and what you watch and believe in television even nowadays. But I think most religions have something like that, but the Catholics are pretty much known for that, for that aspect of their theology. So I just wanted to talk with them more because I was just starting my interest. In fact, my interest actually goes way back to my childhood. My parents used to tell me ghost stories when I was a youngster. And there was a very famous ghost story here in the Chicagoland area of a hitchhiking ghost called Resurrection Mary. And it's been seen ever since the middle to late 1930s of a girl that was hitchhiking back home from from a dance if they're getting into an argument with their boyfriend. And somewhere along the way, in the dark along Archer Avenue, which is very dark in the 1930s, she was struck and killed by a hit-and-run car. According to the legend, people still see her trying to hitchhike back home. And my mom and my dad was more or less the ghost hunter of the family, so to speak. I mean, he really was interested in this type of stuff, and it was not just enough for him to hear the ghost story. He actually wanted to see for himself. So after taking my mom out on a dinner, a dance, a movie, a show, whatever the case may be, every Saturday night, my dad would drive around Resurrection Cemetery with my mom in the car looking for that guy. Much to the chagrin of my mom, who was absolutely terrified at the time. And my dad died quite young. He was in his 40s. But my mom continued telling me that story even later on. And even though I was terrified about it, it was actually my first ghost story that I was told. And that might have been what got me started on this trail that I'm on today.
Wow.
I love those stories like that. Every town's got half a dozen. I think there's one up on Lookout Mountain here because I'm at the Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama line where I live now, and Andrew does too. But I think there's one up on Lookout Mountain in Sand Mountain. They call it the dancing lady walks from Mentone down.
I believe there's actually one in a town. I believe it's in Tennessee called Hensley. Mm-hmm. And there's a ghost that's been seen along the road there in the town of Hensley. It's a very small town. Unfortunately, I don't remember the name of the road offhand. The story there basically is that she was coming home from a prom or something, and she got killed on this bridge or something. She was walking home, and one car got too close and struck her and left her for dead. And people to this day have actually picked her up and continued her journey from there to her house. And she would tell them where she lived, where the house was, as they would open the door to let her out. There's nobody in the back seat. So they'd go up and they'd knock on the door. They'd say, this woman was in the car. She gave me your name. And, they say, the parents go, what kind of baloney are you trying to pull? My daughter's been dead for years. And wow. that kind of ties into some of the Resurrection Mary stories because, one very famous encounter happened in 1939. A man by the name of Jerry Palis had picked up this girl and apparently danced with her the whole evening at the Willowbrook Ballroom, which is very unusual, to say nothing of having an encounter, a brief encounter, but having a long encounter like that. Mm-hmm. And he was a very religious man himself. He was a Catholic. Everybody knew Jerry, said he never fibbed, he never fabricated anything. And then on the way home, she wanted to go home, but then go past the cemetery. And Jerry said, well, I mean, sure, if you want. And then as they got close to the cemetery, she jumped out of the car and said, where I'm going, you can't follow me. And she ran across the road and disappeared in plain view of Jerry. The very next day, he goes to the house where the address was, walks up to the door. Before he even had a chance to knock, an elderly woman came out and kind of barked at him and said, what do you want? And he said, well, I'm just wanting to make sure that Mary got home safely last night. She goes, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no Mary here. And it went back and forth several times. He was about ready to give up when he looked past a woman, and there on the mantle of the fireplace was a picture of the girl he had been with the night before. An absolute, no doubt in his mind. And he goes, that's the girl I was with. And then the old lady began to cry. She says, you couldn't have been with my daughter. She's been dead for years.
Imagine how
some of this ties into folklore, obviously.
Yeah.
Like ghost stories, a staple of American folklore. But when you have a connection beyond the folklore, beyond the legend, where you have, somebody being struck and killed, and there's been, umpteen witnesses throughout the years. I mean, this has been going on since the latter 1930s. I'm sure there's been thousands of people that have seen her ever since that time. And a lot of people that saw her that weren't even aware of the story, which that's even better because, I mean, you can have somebody that heard the story and then you have a copycat. I saw him too, or I saw her too. Mm-hmm. But then when you're coming from, a different city, a different state, sometimes even a different country, and you're just traveling along there and you see something and you don't know what the heck it is, or suddenly it disappears, then you question your own sanity. What did you just see? So I think that at least lends a bit more credibility to the story rather than simply just a bit of urban legend.
Mm. We have a similar type of haunting around here that the Crybaby Bridge. They probably have them up there too.
Oh yeah,
I think that's pretty much America wide. But anytime there's a bridge in the country, it's Crybaby Bridge. It's a Snickers. What's it? A Snickers bar or a bottle of milk that you leave and drive across, and it comes back and you ate. And I didn't know until I was about 20 something, maybe 30 years old. But there was a bridge by my house that I fished at like 24/7, under it, over it. I'd walk to the head of the creek where the cave was. I mean, I was there all the time if I wasn't at school or at work. And I'm like driving around with my friends, having fun. And they're like, "Oh, we're on Crybaby Bridge." I'm like, "Crybaby what?" Okay, you put a bottle there. I'm like, "Bro, there's no dead baby around here." I would have heard it by now. That's the first time I realized it was something that expounded beyond just one bridge.
Yeah, and that kind of even ties into the story of La Llorona. If you ever heard of La Llorona, the weeping lady.
The Ditch Witch?
It's the same thing. I mean, she either throws her babies over the bridge, she falls over the bridge with the babies. She's just distraught or something, and then she's running down the bank of the river, crying out, "Mis hijos, my children." And then people hear that screaming, crying lady, which is kind of similar to these crybaby bridges in the story that basically it's either an accident or a woman's distraught, she's insane, the babies fall out of her arms, and she drowns trying to save the babies, all that kind of stuff. Now, most of these again are pretty much urban legend.
Yeah.
When I wrote my book on haunted highways and bridges, I came across just dozens of crybaby bridges, and I said, well, if I put every single one in the book's going to be about that thick. So I kind of went through and I kind of picked ones that seem to have a bit of, if you want to use the word credibility, to the story than some of the others, because again, so many of these others are probably just repeats or just just embellishment of another story or a copycat type thing. So there were a few that actually, to my knowledge, I mean, when I looked up, some of the newspaper accounts and talked to other paranormal researchers in the area, other groups that have been out there, and actually visited a few crybaby bridges myself, one down in Benton, Illinois, which was, there was absolutely no houses for miles around. So you're not picking up somebody's radio or, somebody crying baby in their house, because it's miles away. And we didn't hear that, unfortunately. We didn't have enough time to be out there at night to see if we could have picked anything up like that. And usually when you're kind of scoping out an area, you're kind of waiting for things to happen. That's when things don't happen.
Watch pot.
Yeah.
I had a Robert. You ever heard of Robert Beto with Mexico Unexplained?
No, I never have.
Yeah, he's been on Coast to Coast as well, but he has a whole thing with the Mexican cryptids and the Mexican ghost stories. And La Llorona is like his sigil, and he said he saw it one time when he was going on a bus to school back in New Mexico, and I said the exact same thing you just said. I said it's kind of like the Mexican Crybaby Bridge. I said that exact same phrase.
Yeah.
And he sells trinkets and stuff from Mexico. He imports them and stuff. For the Mexican restaurants always have the different artifacts. And he designed one and was selling it en masse. And then there was a movie came out called La Llorona just a few years ago, and he didn't know that movie production house had reached out to his distribution center and bought all his stuff for the movie. So here he is, terrified of La Llorona, and he's watching this movie about it. Obviously creeped out, dark house. All of a sudden, there's his stuff in the movie. He said that's the scariest he's ever been since doing this, and he called his distribution and said, "Did you know they were doing this? Because I'm not okay with this."
Wow.
He said it's the scariest he's ever been doing the whole thing. I was like, I can imagine, especially if you didn't know it was going to happen. There's your stuff that you made.
Yeah. Well, from what I understand, the La Llorona story seems to be mostly reported in the Southwest, in New Mexico, Arizona, even northern, obviously through Mexico, obviously, and through those border states, even Texas and so forth. But I've been doing some research on those recently, for obviously my book on haunted highways and bridges, and I determined that some of these La Llorona stories have even been reported as far north as Montana. Now again, are they copycats, or are they just trying to put their little dot on the map and say, okay, we got a very famous ghost story? It's really kind of hard to say. That's why I reached out to what I believe to be respected paranormal teams in the area that would have no reason to fabricate a story. They may have investigated it themselves. They may have talked to eyewitnesses and so forth, and they may even know some people personally that have had some encounters that are like kind of non-liars, to say, but just to say right out there. But so that's kind of how I kind of do my research. Was I try to do stuff obviously through libraries, historical society, through the internet, but I think it's very advantageous to talk to other people that are doing the same thing that I'm doing, in their neck of the woods, to see what they have picked up, what they've researched, and how they believe that these stories are true, or they're urban legends, old wives' tales, or whatever.
So,
It's fascinating how urban legends get spread. Go ahead, Andrew.
so I'm looking at your FAQ. I kind of like how you categorize these things. So, for example, the Mexican Crybaby Bridge. What would you classify that as? Ghost, poltergeist, EVP? Is it all of that, or are there specific elements to that phenomenon?
That's really kind of a hard question, because it really depends on the credibility of the witnesses and the credibility of the team. I mean,
like one of the bridges you described in your book. You said you tried to pick the most credible ones. So
yeah.
Like,
well, in those cases, like I said, there were either newspaper articles of some sort of accident that actually happened on that bridge, where a woman and a baby or a baby died on that bridge. And in some cases that there were very legit paranormal teams that came afterwards to research and investigate those sightings. So that's why I would consider that more of a if I was given it from 0 to 10, and 10 being absolutely sure there's a ghost and 0 no way, I would put those probably in a 7 category.
Wow.
Up there, because
Okay.
again, we know that through, at least I know through my historical research, and I know you guys have probably come across this as well. I mean, anytime we have an untimely death, there can be that possibility of some sort of activity taking place. Hollywood has done a really nice job in recent years with Ghost and Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore, others with Nicole Kidman, Bruce Willis, and Sixth Sense, showing how people die accidentally or violently, and then they come back as a ghost because they don't realize that they have passed on. And in these cases where they have untimely deaths, in the La Llorona story or the Crybaby Bridge story, if there was actually an accident or some sort of untimely death, that adds to the spice, so to speak. There could be actually something going on there as far as some sort of activity. And obviously it's much better to go out there and collect evidence. But again, evidence can be kind of hard to come by in some cases. I mean, I've been to close to 4,000 cases in my almost 50 years now. I'd be going on 48 years this year. So I mean, it's still something that when you talk about a spirit or a ghost or something like that, I mean, the words are interchangeable, but you have the residual haunting, and then you have the intelligent haunt. The residual is kind of like a tape loop playing back some sort of untimely death or tragedy, and that could be where the La Llorona kind of fits in, because from what I understand, there hasn't been, I could be wrong, I don't think there has been any intelligent communication between the baby, the mother, whoever was there, and the investigator. It just seems to be, what happened there was a tragedy, there was a trauma involved, and then, people will pick up that that it's kind of like whatever happened there was kind of embedded in the fabric of time and space. And for some reason, these things replay itself to people that happen to be traveling through an area, or in some cases investigating, like we would do. So I think because of that, there's no real intelligence there. It's just a tragedy being replayed, which is still a pretty fascinating thing in itself. Because I mean, you're seeing a snippet of time.
So Dale, is that like sights and sounds, or
yeah, it can
depends.
be sight and sounds. I mean, there's a very famous place in my neck of the woods here in Chicago, where there was a double murder.
Oh wow!
Place done in 1956, 57 for the Grind sisters, and one of my books in my publishing company was written by another author called Murder Gone Cold, which he talks about this, and they were murdered someplace else, and their bodies were simply thrown over this culvert near a river, and they were found by a passing motorist within 20 some days later, and what happens since that time, that was since the 1950s, beginning about 1960 or so, people have actually seen and heard a car screeching up to the place where the bodies were discovered, opening up doors. Some people have actually seen this car and seen apparently dead bodies being thrown over there. The doors will slam, the car will speed away and disappear before it reaches the top of the hill. When police are called out there to investigate what they believe to be another grisly crime scene, they find no bodies, no evidence of anything, and it's been going on for at least 30 years.
Where was that? In Illinois?
It's in Illinois. It's in Burr Ridge, Illinois. It's called German Church Road. It's in my book on Windy City Ghosts, the first book that I wrote about. Back in the late 1990s, and I republished it myself in the early 2000s. And it's just another one of those, where people say, well, I mean, how can a ghost come back as a car? A car has no spirit. Well, we're not talking about that. We're talking about something, again, a tragedy that has embedded itself in the fabric of time and space, and people are just seeing that replay, the crime scene being replayed over and over again to people, sometimes only sight, sometimes sound, but sometimes both.
So you saying it was in Illinois? That brings back a question I was going to ask earlier that you actually answered. I was going to see where your home base was up there, Chicagoland area.
Yeah.
So are you actively a paranormal investigator? The group.
Yeah, I've been. This is my 48th year, and I'm 70 years old. I have no intention of slowing down as long as I can. I mean, I got a whole big agenda of things going on this year, including a 3-week trip to England and Scotland. Where I'll be investigating all kinds of places in England and Scotland, and hopefully meeting with some of the fellow investigators up there from the TV show Most Haunted. If you ever saw that series, Cyrano O'Keefe and Yvette Fielding, we're going to be meeting them up there and actually investigating the Hellfire Caves up there. One of the places that I've never been to, and I think it was done by one of these paranormal groups on TV, which I don't like to give them any more advertisement as I possibly can. But yeah, I mean, besides that, I'll be going to, going back to Gettysburg again next year. I'll be traveling to South Carolina and Georgia to investigate some of the places associated with the Civil War, including Savannah, Atlanta, Andersonville Prison, Fort Sumter, where the Civil War began, and places like that. I'm a big Civil War nut too, and obviously the Civil War was a gruesome war. I mean, it was pitting brother against brother, family against family, and I've been to a lot of Civil War battlefields where we have picked up and actually recorded both video and audio of strange things that happened out there. Reenactments of you can hear like small arms fire, you can hear cannons in the background, you can actually sometimes hear the screams of people, and that's chilling. It really is. I mean, we've been out there. I've been out to Gettysburg at least eight or nine times, and it never fails to produce something out there. So we're going to be heading back there again in 2024, and also heading out to the Queen Mary out in Long Beach, very famous haunted ship out there. With my California state coordinator that's going to take us around and show us a lot of sites out there. So, yeah, I'm very active in the paranormal field still. We have a very active team. We try to plan as many things as we possibly can throughout the year. Usually, almost every weekend is filled up with something, through the course of the spring, summer, and fall. Of course, if you don't know Chicago winters like I know Chicago winters. So, I mean, it's like 6 months of summer and 6 months of winter. That's pretty much it here in Chicago. So we try to stock up our weekends as best as we can to investigate locations and go to places all across the country.
I think a Chicago winter would kill me physically, not mentally, just instant death. Like, what is this?
Yeah, Dale. My brother lives in Andersonville, so I've only visited twice in 10 years. So, yeah, that's enough for. I'm a Floridian, so that's too much for me.
And I love Savannah. Savannah's like, if I was talking to actually Andrew's wife today about that, I will buy a house. I'm always going to have my home base here in Alabama just because that's where everybody I know lives. But I will buy a house in Savannah and a house in Montana, and that'll be my back and forth. But as far as I've interviewed a bunch of paranormal groups I was getting to a question there on here, a bunch of paranormal groups, and they all have one thing in common. They all have like their home base haunting. Do you have a home base haunting? It's usually like a local tuberculosis hospital for some reason, just within like 2 miles of their house.
Yeah, one of the places that I've done a lot of research in and actually started researching as early as 1978 here was a place called Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. And Bachelor's Grove Cemetery is a small kind of pioneer cemetery that was founded around, it was incorporated around 1864, just at the end of the Civil War, so to speak, by a guy named John Everdeen. In fact, it was called Everdeen Woods for a while. And this was an area that prior to becoming a cemetery was a homestead for German and Irish immigrants that were coming into the country during the 1830s, excuse me. And they had their homesteads out there. They had Bachelor's Grove, Smith's Grove, Cooper's Grove, Morton Grove, and anything but the Grove pretty much is German descent. And they were out there and they were farming. They picked up land for about $1.25 an acre at the time, which was a lot of money back then. But today, I mean, get an acre of land for $1.25, you jump at that. So eventually, some of those people afterwards, when they died, they were set aside in the cemetery. And eventually, the road that the cemetery was on, called Bachelor's Grove Road, was closed off when the new turnpike was put in. So it was kind of like people saying, well, why is the cemetery on the middle of the woods? Where it wasn't. It was on the main drag at one time, but it was just technology just bypassed it. And throughout the years, people have seen all types of strange things out there, from disappearing houses that people see along the side of the road, to disappearing pickup trucks and automobiles, to a lady dressed in white seen on moonlit nights carrying a child in her arms, two Cook County forest rangers seeing what appeared to be a farmer and his horse dragging a plow that emerged from the lagoon and crossed directly in front of their oncoming car in the middle of the turnpike and disappeared in the Rubia woods across the street. And they were like, what did we just see? I mean, all kinds of really strange stuff there. And we've been investigating that. The very first official investigation I did out there was in 1982 with a professional psychic named Pat Schenberg, who was the past president of the Illinois Society for Psychic Research and a very gifted clairvoyant. And that was the very first time I had ever worked with a psychic. And she had never been to the location. And as soon as she walked into the cemetery, she was able to pick out names and things that she was seeing, clairvoyantly, because they can see things that we can't see. And one of the first things that she saw was a lady, kind of like a glowy form off to the left-hand side. And we have this on videotape and audio tape because we followed her through the cemetery. I told her nothing about this cemetery, which is the way I prefer. I don't like to give them any unconscious thoughts. And I said, before we go there, can you give me a name? Tell me this person's name. And she said, strange sounding name like Dora or Dorma, Meyer or Myers. And in fact, the entire transcript from this is actually, you can find on my website under Bachelor's Grove. I typed out the entire transcript and put it up there. And I said, okay, that's
right.
good enough. So we started to walk over there, and the tombstone is a family plot, so it says Warren on there, Warran. But then the woman's name was Dora, and which is what she said, Dora or Dorma. And we later determined that her maiden name was Meyer.
Wow.
Dora Myers. And that knocked my socks off. That literally knocked my socks off. I said, wow. And we worked with her extensively, for the next 10 years or so. Unfortunately, she died prematurely at the age of 69. And I lost a very good person. I then picked up another psychic I started to work with that actually worked with the Atlanta child murders cases. I don't know if you're familiar with those. But
the Atlanta Monster?
Yeah. And she worked with police and officials that brought her in for what they call psychic criminology. And she also worked with the Janine Nicarico and Melissa Ackerman cases here in the Chicagoland area. And one interesting thing, I don't want to get too far off the track, but one interesting thing,
Oh, you're good.
she wasn't able to actually pinpoint where the bodies were. But she told the police kind of cryptidly that you're going to find the bodies at the tip of a dolphin's nose. And they go, huh? So they didn't really pay much attention to that until later on when they found the bodies. And then aerial photography showed that the way the roads converged, it looked like a dolphin's nose and the rest of the dorsal fin behind.
Oh gosh!
And that just creeped me out. It absolutely creeped me out. I go, I at that point I said that I believe that there are people that can pick up these things. Not everybody. There's a lot of charlatans out there. There's a lot of false prophets and so forth. But there are a lot of people out there that can do this, and it does augment what I do in the field. Because again, when I bring in a psychic or a clairvoyant or a medium, I don't tell them anything about what's going on. I don't even tell my own team what's going on when we go in to investigate a private home, because I don't want to put preconceived notions in somebody's mind of what's going on. So they don't go. So my team doesn't immediately go to the creepy attic or the glue basement. They just go throughout the building with the equipment, their own feelings, their own senses, to see what they can pick up. So it seems to work really well for us that way. And that way, we're not kind of tainting the investigation before we even get there. And that's why some of these TV shows, if you see them, unfortunately, I won't name them, because I got enough hate mail as it is. But some of these TV shows, as they're traveling up to their spot that they're going to investigate, they're talking to each other on walkie-talkie. Hey, this is what's going on. They see this apparition walking down the stairs. So they already know what's going on before they get there.
They give them a brief. They just give them on the way.
Yeah. Which to me is it just defeats the whole purpose of what you're trying to do. If you're trying to get a legitimate investigation, then do it without telling your team anything. I mean, your team's going to know that you're going to someplace that's allegedly haunted, but that's all they're going to know.
Yeah, to get real results, like this is Annie, and you're like, how do you know it's Annie? She said it. Like, well, wouldn't you know it? This place is haunted by somebody's grandmother named Annie.
Yeah.
That's a whole lot. It's a whole lot better than knowing. Oh, Andrew dropped. Anyway, is the psychic you were just mentioning? Is she still with us? Still alive?
Well, the first one, no, she died at the age of 69, about 10 years ago. Not the other one, Trudy. I'll just mention her first name, Trudy. She unfortunately she got married and she moved away, and I lost track of her, unfortunately. So I'm assuming she's still around. She was 10 or 15 years younger than me, so she's probably still around. But I just lost track of her, when she got married and so forth. But again, it's not that easy to come across somebody who's very gifted as a psychic. And normally we don't use psychics in our work because initially, when we're going in to do an investigation, it's kind of a fact-finding mission to find out whether or not what's going on has a natural explanation for it. There can be something that we can rule out without bringing in, a big team of psychics and so forth when we discover that what we have determined is simply a natural explanation or something. So we don't waste all that time. So when we go through our investigation, It's in a 3-step phase. The first phase, we go in and we, nobody knows what's going on. They have a floor plan. They go through the rooms in teams of 2, the whole house or whatever it is. They collect with their data. And then in step number 2, before the client tells my team what's going on, I tell my team to tell the client what they picked up, which I think is more scientific that way. Mm-hmm. And then when they tell them everything that they've picked up or whatever they believe, then the client informs our rest of our team what's going on. And then in phase 3, we'll go and we'll set up equipment and cameras and do EVP sessions and things of that nature. And then, of course, when we collect the data, we go back and we talk to the client again. We arrange a time where we can go over the information we have. We give them a copy of anything we pick up, a report, and so forth. And then if there's a follow-up, if for some reason the people are just so absolutely terrified, they just want whatever they're to leave, that might be somewhere where we bring in a medium or a psychic or a clairvoyant to try to make actual, communication, with the spirit. Because sometimes the communication that we get can be sketchy in some cases. If we bring in somebody that can actually connect with somebody clairvoyantly or telepathically, that might be something that they could, maybe just, kind of tell them that, they don't belong here, that they're dead. In fact, again, a lot of, ghosts don't realize that they have passed on. So if you just tell the spirit that you're not alive anymore, you're dead, and they sometimes just move on their own. Because if you remember Patrick Swayze in Ghost, he came back mm-hmm. after chasing the guy on the road and saw his dead body being held by his fiance, and he goes, "Whoa, what's going on?" He didn't even know. He didn't even realize he was dead. And that's that's something that seems to be a lot of researchers tend to say is what causes spirits to remain, because they're here one moment, they're gone the next moment. It can be like a shooting, a drowning, an accident, something like that, where you're just gone in an instant. And unfortunately, living here in the city of, I don't live in the city of Chicago, but I live south of the city of Chicago. And the city of Chicago is really rampant with violence and gun violence and drive-by shootings. Mm-hmm. If only a portion of those people that have died in all those years come back as ghosts, I mean, we would have an overpopulation of spirits, literally, in the city of Chicago.
It may have one anyway.
Yeah,
you never know. Yeah, I was asking about that psychic because of the show Mindhunter on Netflix had her depicted on it. It's crazy because they had the I don't know if you ever saw it. It's a really good show. One of the best Netflix ever made. It's amazing. And the last season, I guess the last half of the last season, was all about the Atlanta Monster.
Mm.
And I may be mixing up a podcast with the show in my mind right now. So if you watch it like that dude was full of shit, they didn't mention her. I think that they were like saying, we're going to trust a psychic. I know I listened to the Atlanta Monster podcast. I know I listened to the last podcast on the left about it, but they also, I would bet, I'd bet a cool $5 right now that they were talking about that psychic on Mindhunter. Cause it was like, well, how are you going to know, you know the whole story, how crazy it was. They never called him, but once they arrested the dude they thought it was, the murder stopped. Yeah. Crazy looking dude with a fro.
Yeah, I'll have to check that podcast out to see if that's what they're talking about. I know she was brought in. Now, she may not have been the only psychic brought in. They may have brought others in, but I know she was. That was part of her resume. And the thing about her, which I really enjoyed, and even the first psychic I worked with, that neither one of them thought they needed to advertise. They didn't need to go on psychic fairs or to get on phone psychics and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. All these weird things. They, in fact, the second one I worked with only wanted to be identified by her first name, Trudy. To me, that lent a bit more credibility to her ability herself. That she didn't necessarily want to be identified. She wasn't out for making money. She was out there helping people. And we investigated a house in Chicago that, again, I told her nothing about. And when we got there, before we got there, she said, "I'm going to draw you kind of like sketch of the woman's bedroom. And in her closet is going to be an overabundance of this color purple. And she kind of drew this, okay, here's the door, here's the window, here's the dresser over here, the bed's over here, and so forth. And before we even got there, so I had that in my hand. And when we got there, I actually have a picture of her sitting on the floor, opening the closet and pointing, and look at all the purple. The whole closet filled with purple, literally. Now, the weird part about it, as we walked in, instead of the bed being on the right side, it was on the left side. Instead of the bureau being in the front, it was over on this side. It was 180 degrees turned about. It was like as though she was looking at the bedroom using remote viewing from the outside. Instead of walking through the door, she was looking from this side. So she basically had the thing switched around. And I go, to me, that was like, a hit, in my opinion, because she had it at 180 degrees turned about.
How does it make you feel whenever that happened and it was accurate, like to that level?
Oh, I mean, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
To make your hair stand up on your... Is it like that?
I mean, I've had that happen to me. I've actually, when Pat Schenberg was pointing out these spirits that she was seeing at Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, I mean, I was getting goosebumps. I mean, this was a warm late May, early June time that we were in there, so it wasn't cold out or anything. It was pleasant out there, and I was literally getting goosebumps. And she was telling me how the spirits were interacting with some of our equipment. We had cameras set up. This is back in '82, so again, we didn't have a lot of equipment. We were using a black and white high-speed infrared film that we were using in our 35 millimeter cameras. And she said that several of them seemed to be touching the cameras. They were very, kind of, curious about that because they had never seen a camera like that. And there was a gentleman that was dressed like a farmer that was standing by the fence, and he was literally crying. And I said, well, can you find out why he's crying? Why he's so distraught? And she said, well, he is so pent up with this emotion because the cars don't go past the cemetery anymore. And if you remember what I said, that road was closed off when that new turnpike was put in, so it was closed off to any type of traffic. It was only a footpath. So he was just so sad that nobody was coming to visit the graves anymore.
Gosh.
You don't think about that. That is kind of sad.
It is.
They're used to decades of that, and all of a sudden nothing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Dale, I had a question. You kind of rewinding back about the roads, that there was a spirit crossing the road, right? And that would appear and then cross the road, and people driving would see that crossing the road.
Yeah.
Would that ever? Here's like my inception moment. Would that ever, if something were to happen, like someone freaked out and like got into an accident themselves and died, how do you think that would that be an untimely death? Would that cause possibly another ghost?
It's a very distinct possibility.
And would they know that ghost with their ghost? Kind of. I mean, in your opinion, I know this is a reach, but that made me think about like a ghost within a ghost creating a ghost kind of situation.
Yeah, if you think about where we go when we die, first of all, we don't know that where we go when we die until we die. I mean, some people say if you're a Christian, it's for heaven, it's hell, or in the Catholic, we say sometimes purgatory. Other people will say it's a higher state of evolution. It's a higher consciousness that we go to. Einstein says that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So the energies within our bodies, which are biochemical energies that can be measured with the equipment that I have, where does that energy go when we die? I mean, if we all go to the same place, then we would obviously meet other people. And so in answer to your question, if that lady died seeing a ghost, she probably would meet that ghost on the other side. because she had an encounter with that spirit. Now, there have been, I can't say if I can ever remember off the top of my head of actually somebody seeing a ghost and dying in an accident like that, but I'm sure it's happened in the past. And
It's not something you can really document.
yeah,
Yeah.
document, but I mean, you could say, well, it would be hard to say because the person already had died, so you wouldn't, unless that person got into a severe accident before she died. She said, "I saw the spirit here," and then she died. I mean, that could, you would think that would be like a deathbed confession, and you would not think that somebody's making that up. Like when somebody commits a murder and they say before they die, "Yeah, I committed this murder." I mean, that's considered fact because nobody's going to really. Why would a person who's going to die make up a story knowing that they're going to die? And the same thing in answer to your question. That would be going in the same. People seem to have near-death experiences, after life experiences, where they're going through a tunnel, they're seeing a white light, they're reaching out to friends and relatives on the other side. I mean, these people sometimes are brought back from the brink of death, through our technologies of restarting your heart and so forth. And they explain to people that they've seen friends and relatives that they've seen going through. They actually floating over the operating table, and they're seeing the doctors frantically trying to revive them, and they're just shooting down this tunnel of light, and all of a sudden they're just drawn back at the speed of light, so to speak, back into their own body. In some cases, they're very, very distraught about that because they say it's a very pleasant situation. They were total peace. They were seeing friends and relatives that had died, and in some cases, even pets that had passed over to the other side. And I truly believe that you will see your pet on the other side. I mean, I'm a great believer that there are a lot of reports of animal ghosts throughout the world, especially in the Chicagoland area, all different types of reports. So, I think if that same flow of a person's spirit from one body is going to be the same as the other person's body. And where we end up going is going to be the same place. Now, taking a step back, I talked about purgatory. Now, that's really more of a Catholic type thing, I believe, than it is any other type of religion. And purgatory, the way I was when I was growing up, a youngster myself, maybe 6, 7 years old, going to church, the way the priest explained it to me is that purgatory meant that you were not quite good enough to go to heaven, but you're not quite bad enough to go to hell. So you're kind of like in a holding pattern in between. Limbo. And that's what he explained it to me. Whether that's actually true. Now, if we look at if we normally just die, just a natural death, we're going to go one way or the other. In my belief, I mean, it could be somebody else's belief, and you wouldn't go to purgatory. So the way I look at it, well, look at what purgatory is. The explanation I was given. You're not bad enough for hell. You're not good enough for heaven. So you're in between. Well, isn't that what ghosts really are?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it almost explains it. I've always thought that was what it was.
Now, aren't they in between, going someplace? I mean, you can't dispel their energy. Their energy just goes someplace. So where does it go? Maybe it does hang around here for a while because they haven't finished what they needed to finish here on Earth. Maybe they needed to finish more. Maybe there's some unfinished business. Maybe they simply just don't want to give up physical life at that point. Or maybe they just are confused, and a lot of people, there's so many traffic accidents that people are drunk or high on medication and they crash and they die. And unfortunately, when you're alive and you're drunk, you're in a different state of mind, right? I mean, you're like, oh, right? If you die as a ghost in that condition, well, just think of what you would be like. Even like, oh, where am I at now? So I mean, that kind of goes along with that whole idea that sometimes spirits that die untimely in their not right state of mind very, very often make very good ghosts because they do hang around for a while.
Kind of reminiscent of like a suicide victim. How that's like that's got to be the ultimate sort of I don't know I'm dead kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's really unnatural.
Yeah, it's unnatural for somebody to take their own life. I mean, really, life is so precious. It really is. And I'm a big component of suicide prevention and reaching out to people and having hotlines where people can talk to about their condition before it gets that far. Because literally, I will tell you right off the bat, my dad committed suicide at the age of 47. And I was only 9 years old, so I didn't really have a chance to know him very often. But that was the second time he had attempted that. Now, I don't know, I was never actually told, and I still actually don't really know to this day why he did that or why he wanted to do that. He was maybe just unhappy. I don't know. He had 3 beautiful children. I mean, myself, my older sister, my younger brother, and he had a loving wife and everything. But, it's again, it's that state of mind, that you're going to take your own life. You're going to end it all. How does that bode well with becoming a spirit, hanging around here for a while and figuring out, why I did this? Maybe that's kind of like, I hate to say it, I'm not God, but maybe that's kind of a punishment for doing what you're doing. You're going to hang around here for a while. I don't know.
Yeah, that's definitely like I said, it's definitely an altered state. And what if like the like you said the limbo here, and it's like being behind a mirror and can't, or be behind glass and can't get the other person to hear you. Just like that's what purgatory is. It would
Like
make a lot
veil,
of sense.
maybe the veil,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
they say like sometimes the veil is pierced or lifted, and that's what you don't want because things are supposed to stay on one side.
Yeah. That's what CERN's doing.
That's
we
what
got Dogman.
They'll say that certain times of the year, I'm not sure I 100% agree with this, but they say, certain people will say at certain times of the year, the veil is very thin.
Mm-hmm.
And at those particular times, that's where there can be, now I agree with this part, there can be portals. And I did a whole presentation on portal hauntings, and Bachelor's Grove being one of the places that I believe there's a portal there, where spirits are constantly able to just go from one side to the other. And they're not there all the time, because if they were there all the time, people would see them all the time. So they seem to be able to like go through this portal just like we open up a door and go back and forth. Another great example would be the reports in 1966 in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, of the Mothman. And then even Bigfoot. Just think about it. There's never been a Bigfoot body discovered. Why? Do their other Bigfoots carry them through the portal to the other side? Why is this Mothman not being seen anymore? After the collapse of the Silver Bridge in 66 or 67, the Mothman sighting stopped. It's just crazy. I believe that there are times when people can go through portals. Not us, but other spirits that don't have, a flesh and blood type body that can actually go through.
I think Bigfoot may kind of do a thing, kind of force ghost if they do die. I don't know why I believe that, but I did have a witness that's a couple witnesses on here who were, obviously credible as Bigfoot witnesses can get, say they did see an actual portal open up.
Wow.
And yeah, a lot of the guys who I don't know how deep you get into the Bigfoot researchers on Facebook or whatever, but it seems like the guys who are always real mad looking with the camouflage hats, they're not really the best witnesses. It's always the old guys that have like a farm.
Yeah.
That they're the ones like my favorite one, Mr. Randy Bauer from Black Duck, Minnesota, said he was out on a tree stand with an author that wrote a book about his place and saw almost like an elevator door open up with northern lights coming out of it, and 2 orbs came out, and then the orbs started crunching. They turned into Bigfoot.
Wow.
He said he saw it, and the other guy came confirm it. And I'm like, well, there's that. So the portal and the way they can no clip in and out, that would definitely explain why there's no evidence. I know it's easier to say they don't exist, but to me, if all these people are seeing something and the most credible ones. Most of them say they have portals, or at very least talk about they all, even the ones who think they're flesh and blood, they all say that they can mess with the cameras. So that's,
Oh yeah.
I think that kind of lends the evidence. I know you know that ghosts can suck the batteries dry.
Yeah, a lot. Now that author, just a final question. That author wouldn't be Linda Godfrey, would it?
No, it's Michael Quast.
Okay.
I know who you're
I know
talking
Linda
about.
Godfrey was big into Wisconsin and Minnesota paranormal and Bigfoot stuff too before she died.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. This guy he wrote the one. It's called High Strangeness Minnesota, Sasquatch on Minnesota Homestead.
Yeah, I think I
had him on here. Yeah, he's a nice guy, really quiet. I was like, man, I guess I should have just read your book. He was really nice, but you'd answer a question. His one word answer is like name, rank, serial number. I'm like, all right. Well, we did get the witness Randy and him on here, and that was more lively because he could actually explain it. It was like having a little what's the word, panel.
Yeah.
But the first time, he was one of the first guys I went to, and I started doing this, seriously, without being just like me and my friend in the basement doing a podcast. And when it hit me that he wasn't lying and this may be real stuff, I felt weird for like a few days. Like I had a crisis. I'm like walking around touching the wall. Is this real? I mean, it was a different experience. First time I realized maybe it wasn't all just fun and games. But the ghost thing I've always been 100% on. And aliens, obviously, because statistically there have to be aliens somewhere.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
If not just a bacteria somewhere, but that's all I care about.
It would be unscientific and maybe even quite dumb thinking to think that we are the only
Or arrogant
life in the entire universe. I mean, as Carl Sagan said, and even though he was a skeptic about all this stuff, he would say that there are billions of galaxies and billions of planets. And I mean, for even one of those to have life, I mean, I think that they've come to Earth in the past. I mean, I really have. I mean, they probably are so far in advance of us that they literally have that technology that they've actually able to break the speed of light barrier, because
You're not from Earth, Dale.
Yeah.
From Mars.
Well, I mean, even Einstein said, I don't want to get too into quantum physics here, but I mean, basically, he even said that in his own famous formula, E equals mc squared, which means energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, which means that anything traveling faster than the speed of light automatically turns into energy. So no material object can travel faster than the speed of light. But if you're able somehow to distort the space around what you're traveling through, and that goes into, I'm a big Star Trek fan. I know it's science fiction, but they travel in warp drive. So they're warping the space in front of them, so that makes them travel. Warp 1 is the speed of light, by the way. So when you go in warp 9, that's not like 9 times the speed of light. It's incremental. I can't even say that word, but it's many times faster than warp 1.
Exponentially.
Exponentially. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea of wormholes and black holes, where you go through this wormhole and bam, you're across the galaxy in an instant. I'm sure they've learned to conquer all these things, So that's probably why something 20, 30, 50 light years away, which a light year is the distance that light travels in 1 year at the speed of light, which is still much more than 6 million miles. It's an incredible distance. And I mean, so many of Einstein are proven. I mean, they're not just theories anymore. One of the theories is that time slows down as you go faster than the speed of light. They had actual experiments where they had clocks on Earth and clocks in rockets. Of course, the rockets are only going 25,000 miles an hour, but there was a difference in time, only a second or two, but just showing it that time slows down. So if you were to travel from here to, say, the nearest star, which is Proxima Centauri, which is 4.2 light years away, which would probably take you at the speed of light, 4.2 years there and 4.2 years back. You came back, 40 or 50 or 100 years would have passed. All your friends, all your loved ones are gone. And that's just the way it is. It's just crazy. So I don't know how we got on this conversation.
Oh, I'm okay with it.
Conversation, but yeah.
What about alien advancement beyond our technology?
Mm-hmm.
Just saying,
And
it's
William
arrogant.
Shatner was here this weekend, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I missed that.
They did a big con here in Huntsville. A lot of Trek stuff here. William Shatner was here. He was on radio.
Huntsville, Alabama?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. I was
NASA.
just in Huntsville a month ago. I was
Really?
out there. I was investigating a spook light in Cloverdale, Alabama, which is near Florence. It's not too far from Florence, Alabama.
No,
and
it's just down the road.
Out there that we were investigating. We never saw anything, but we actually went into Florence, Tuscumbia, Muscle Shoals, and then we actually made a trip into Huntsville to look at some of the many places there that are haunted, some of the buildings. I mean, we talked to quite a number of people that just said, oh, absolutely, there's things going on in these buildings. The University of Northern Alabama, many of their halls, their different buildings, Wesleyan Hall, being probably the oldest building on campus, I think in 1885, if I remember source it correctly. It's got strange things going on in there as well. The off-campus bookstore. I mean, just tons of locations. I've always wanted to go to a Star Trek convention. I think I waited too long, and now most of them are gone from Star Trek.
Yeah, you got George Mackay, and that's about it.
Yeah, Chekhov, Sulu, and Kirk is the only ones that are left. Pretty much everybody else.
Data was there.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I can't think of his name, but you know what I'm
What
talking
about
about.
Picard? Was he there?
Picard? No, he wasn't.
Yeah, he's getting up in age. He's like 80 something now too.
He did not make it so.
Well, William Shatner's in his 90s and he made it.
Yeah.
So
he about can't walk. He's about had it. Yeah, I was like, well, he's 95 years old. So what do you want from him?
yeah.
So you're in Huntsville. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I know they do the ghost walk downtown in the Twickenham district and everything, and they have the Dead Children's Playground.
Yes, we went to there in near Maple Hill Cemetery. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried to do an investigation there. We had some equipment we were going to set up, and we used different what I call real-time devices that you can actually hear in some cases the reply in real time. That's why they call them real-time devices. We had brought along an Obelisk 5. We brought along what's called a Phasma box, and other real-time devices. Unfortunately, there was some real children in the Dead Children's Playground. So we didn't want to do that. We thought it would be kind of awkward to see several grown men in the children's playground. So we just kind of observed it from a distance and was hoping they would leave, and they never left. So we just took some pictures in there. But we had heard about that Dead Children's Playground, and there are so many other buildings. There's a tavern and museum, Pope's Tavern and Museum. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, I went there on a field trip one time. The Civil War Hospital.
Yeah, it used to be a Civil War hospital. According to the internet, they said it was 33 people that died in there during the Civil War. When I talked to the curator, he said there were 16. So, I mean, it was still people that died in there. Now, he didn't actually say much about the ghosts or anything like that because there were other people in the building, so they didn't want to spook the other people out. But, we saw a lot of interesting spots. In fact, we were in there when that we had a cabin we got for free out there in the woods in Cloverdale. So the people that came out to investigate with us, one guy came from South Carolina, the other 2 or 3 people were local. So we got this free cabin. And the first night we were there is when that bad tornado came through the area and hit Mississippi that killed all those people in Mississippi. We were there in Florence and Tuscany.
Oh, wow. So it was a Friday night.
Yeah, I mean, it was. Yeah, I'm a professional weather spotter too. I do weather spotting. I call in stuff for the Weather Bureau. I know what to look for. But I tell you what, when you have no place to go, you don't have no basement, you don't have anything. Your new car is sitting out there, and you're hoping that please don't hail on my new car because you're going to destroy my car. And it didn't. I had no place to put it. But when we went into Florence, I mean, we saw all kind of trees all over the place. It was pretty bad. And we actually heard this tornado. They say it sounds like a freight train. It sounds like a freight train.
Yeah, if you want to spot weather, go to Colbert County in March, and you'll spot the shit out of it.
Wow.
It comes through there and here all the time.
Apparently, I
really don't like it.
The new tornado capital.
It's always been that way. They just can't see them here. They're all rain wrapped, and so they didn't get all the media. That's the problem.
This was at night too, so that was even worse because I couldn't really. I mean, this was like one lightning strike after another, so it was like lighting up the sky like it was broad daylight. So if there was a tornado, I would have been able to see it. But it was coming down. It was horizontal rain, literally. It was terrible. Yeah.
That's one of them welcome to the South moments.
Yeah, I felt so sorry for those people too. They had their homes and everything destroyed. Thank heavens that no historic markers or big historic buildings were destroyed. I mean, some of the trees fell right in front of these old Victorian buildings, but never touched them. So they missed those, but they fell on ordinary people's homes and destroyed that. And a few apartment complexes and It did knock down a 200-year-old church in Mississippi. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that sucker was old.
Is that the last ones?
Yeah, the ones that just came through. Remember, it was 2 weekends in a row.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we were huddled up.
The South Alabama's getting them tomorrow, but they ain't going to get any higher than Auburn.
Okay, good.
I was going to tell you about Maple Hill. Circling back, I'm Catholic as well. I think Andrew is too. But in Maple Hill, there's a traditional Latin mass, and the priest is from my hometown, or came from my hometown to preach there, and so it's right down from the Dead Children's Playground as well. When he does the Andominos Neos, you can't understand a word they're saying for an hour, and then you leave. Everybody just gets up and leaves, like, what just happened? Yeah. He does all that, and you're like, well, and it ends. You're there for like 45 minutes, and everybody stands up and leaves. Like, what in the hell? Where are you going? It's not over.
They do the Latin masses. I mean, they used to do that here in Chicago when I was growing up. I enjoyed it. I never knew what they were saying, but when they do their mass, they actually they're singing, like at the same time they're doing this. Now they do everything apparently in English now, at least.
That was Vatican II that made that.
Yeah.
More accessible.
And the Latin mass, everybody faces away from they face away from the crowd.
Oh,
okay. The back is at you the whole time.
And they have the low mass, which is early in the morning, like 7 a.m. And it's pretty quick. It's like the matinee. You're in and out. And they have the second mass, and that's where they bring in like the sacrifices and they burn stuff. It's a big thing. But it's whenever I got like because Huntsville's got like 4 or 5 Catholic churches, so if you want to customize your weekend, you can go in any time. It's like a movie schedule.
Yeah, matinee. The 9, 10, pretty much every hour on the hour, you can find a church that has one. That's wild. You went to. How often do you come down here? I mean, I'm trying to coordinate with some Southern Tennessee people, so it'd be kind of cool.
That's the first time I've been down to Alabama since the 60s. My stepdad was born in Russellville. And part of the reason I was coming down too was I didn't know that he had died, and apparently he had died back in the 1980s or something. And I actually went to the Florence Health Department in Florence. The state they have a health department in every county pretty much. And I think I was in Colbert County, I believe.
Yeah, Colbert County.
I went to get a death certificate, which, because he's been gone for 30 years, it's free. Why? That's what they told me, but they still ended up charging me $15. So I figured that out. But I was able to find out that he had died of natural causes. He had COPD and everything. On top of that, he smoked his whole life. So this was a really strange thing. We had went to a small cemetery. You might even know where this is at. It's in Hydesville, which is south of Russellville on Route 43. And it's a small cemetery called Hydesville Cemetery. And this cemetery has probably no more than about 100 markers. It's very small. It has about 4 or 5 rows, and that's it. So I think, not a big thing. I should be able to find it pretty easy. So me and my friend from Chicago, too, he came down with me. We were going row by row, row by row, row by row. It's not here. Yeah, it shows it in the death certificate. It shows it in the obituary. I talked to the funeral home, and they said, yeah, he's buried there. I said, well, we can't find it. So we came back the next day after my friend had he went on Find a Grave, and we kind of pinpointed it pretty much. They put a spot right where this thing should have been. And we're going back and forth, and we find it right away. And I'm going, well, why after we went through the cemetery 3 or 4 times, stone by stone, we couldn't find the stone, and now all of a sudden it's there. I thought that was kind of strange myself. And so I was able to pay my respects to my stepdad, because he married my mom back in 65. When I was, I was born in 52, so I was about 13, 14 years old. He wasn't a bad guy. He was kind of a Jekyll and Hyde. When he was sober, he was fine. When he was drunk, he was a bear. So I went there, and I actually went to see a couple of his brothers that are buried also in a cemetery also in that same area, not too far away. Cobalt, I think it's Cobalt Memorial Gardens or something. Pretty big cemetery, and we were able to find him as well. So we went there, and we did a whole bunch of I guess I won't say really investigating, but I mean there was a place, I think it was in either Florence or I can't remember. I have to look at my notes. Either Florence or Huntsville, called Trowbridge's Ice Cream Parlor, which used to be, again, a Civil War hospital. And, they say that, there's activity takes place there. And so...
That sounds really familiar, by the way.
Yeah, and there was another place called, in the small town of Cherokee, which was kind of west of Florence. There was a Civil War skirmish out there called Cherokee, the Battle of Cherokee Station. And being a big Civil War nut, I said, I have to find this place. So we were able to find it only by that across the street was this large construction facility called the Vulcan's Material Corporation. And I don't know what they do. They produce the material or something. It's a big, giant factory there. The trucks going in and out there all the time. So right across the street, I said, well, okay. And it's just a little bit south of this little bridge. And there's no bridge there anymore. You can see the trestles. So I said, well, that's got to be where the old bridge used to be. And across the street, all you can see is a private home. And then a little further down, kind of an open field and then some trees. I said, well, this has got to be where it's at. So unfortunately, I would have loved to do something there, as far as an EVP or something. Because it was a mild skirmish. I think there was 14 Union soldiers killed, but there was about between 200 to 300 Confederate soldiers. So it was really lopsided. And we went to the library in I can't remember if it was Florence or Huntsville. I'm getting the two confused, but one of the two libraries we went into. So I wanted to do some more research on this, and I met a guy.
That's much closer to Florence, so probably Florence.
Yeah, it could be Florence.
It's much closer. And
we talked to this gentleman who was in the reference section. I told him what I was looking for without saying I was looking for ghosts, because it turns people off sometimes. So I told him what I was looking for, and just crazy. This guy runs some sort of podcast, and he has some sort of webinar or web page or something devoted to Civil War. I go, wow. what coincidence is that? And he says his boss actually runs the whole thing. So I got his information, I got his boss's email, and I said, well, why isn't it that there is some sort of commemorative plaque out there for those people that died out there? Because I'm a big contributor to the American Battlefield Trust. I always have been, always will be. And I said, why can't we at least put together some kind of fundraiser, some sort of GoFundMe page, something where we can get just some sort of plaque out there that says Battle of Cherokee Station fought on this day, this year, so many people died in this field behind us. Why can't we do that? He says, I think we should be able to. He said, nobody ever came up with that idea before. Wow.
I'm shocked there's not. There's like 2 organizations dedicated to historical markers.
Yeah. So I said, I'm going to be contacting you and your boss, and we're going to see if we can put together some sort of money, and I'd be happy to donate to that so we can get some sort of marker. Because, I mean, this hallowed ground. I mean, people bled on this ground. They died. They took their last breath on this ground, you know. Besides the fact it could or could not be haunted. I mean, I'm just a big Civil War nut. I mean, in fact, if you ever been to Gettysburg, I don't know if you ever have, but you know, by the on the first day of battle, which is very near the Lutheran Theological Seminary on Seminary Ridge, there's actually some posters, you know, poster boards. I mean, you know, with people's names and donors of people that donated money to help save Seminary Ridge. And my name's on there and will be on there for all eternity that I donated money for that battlefield. And I wanted to see that. And I was just told here recently that some of the money that I spent to save a section of Fredericksburg battlefield, that they do have some markers there on that property, which also have my name on it as well.
No.
So I don't do it just to get my name on it, but I do it just to help, you know, save this. And there are so many battlefields which are in danger of, urban sprawl or those turbine farms and things of that nature, and factories. I say. Hotels. I said, why would you want a hotel on a battlefield where so many people died? You know, it just doesn't.
They're asking for it at that point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, golly.
Now, was the Civil War people you met from Cherokee, were they ghosts or just Civil War buffs?
They were just Civil War buffs.
Okay.
Yeah. And I told them I will be getting back to them. I've been so busy, I haven't had a chance to yet, but I will get back to them. And, you know, I've actually given talks here to the there's a Civil War roundtable discussion that happens every month, and I've actually gave them a talk, but they actually wanted to talk about the Civil War battlefield ghosts, which was kind of cool. So I gave a talk on that, and I was able to donate some of my books that I had, some duplicates on Civil War stuff to them, because they have kind of a like a lending library and so forth. So I'm a big advocate of that part of history in particular.
Oh, yeah.
And I get very emotional, really, when I get on the battlefield and I start talking about not necessarily just the ghost stories, but just how people died on the battlefield, which is really a shame for all that, brother fighting brother, and it's just something that probably should have never happened, but it's part of history. So.
Yeah, and I don't like they're trying to erase it to a certain degree. I hate that
exactly.
shit.
I don't agree with that. I mean, I can understand to a point what people are trying to say, that perhaps what General Lee and the Confederates was doing was almost like an insurrection, but they were basically standing up for states' rights as well. I mean, it was the institution of slavery in some cases, but I mean, to later on, and the Confederates were punished for that. They were punished not only from the Civil War battles, but then through Reconstruction and everything else. They were punished really terribly bad for that. But then to this day and age, to try to erase history by taking off Confederate markers and things off of all over, literally, and just disposing of them. That's why the American Battlefield Trust said that those battlefields, they will never take those markers off those battlefields because that is part of history. That's what it is.
History is one of those precious commodities we have, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
They're not making new ones.
And Bobby, remember we had that historian and Wham, and she like reinforced the importance of history. Like someone that versed in history, imagine forgetting something and you're bound to repeat it, right? Like
it's the equivalent to losing a vaccine to a disease that comes around every 30 years.
It's a precious tool. Like whether you want to use it or not, well, that's up to you. But we shouldn't forget what happened in the past, good, bad, or indifferent, right?
Yeah. And speaking of Huntsville, this is really specific to Huntsville, and if I ever become a stand-up comedian, it's going to be half my act. I swear to God. But the most ironic part about that, when it comes to Huntsville, is you got the who may or may not be carpetbaggers coming down here, because we have the big arsenal and stuff, and they're bringing their politics with them. Be that as it may, it happens. But they tear down the Confederate statues, all the while driving by 6 to 8 buildings named after Nazis.
Yeah.
And and Andrew's ass works in a Nazi building.
I do.
He has a swastika tattoo. Show everybody.
No, I don't. It's
no,
but cross.
where we kind of work. He works in the Von Braun Center. I've worked near it, adjacent to it. I see it every day. I go by the Von Braun Center on my way to the gym. The Von Braun complex.
The con is Von Braun.
Yeah, William Shatner.
He was the Von Braun Center. It's where we have our hockey and our
the concerts, the comedy
concerts, a lot of that stuff.
But they tore down the Confederate statue from the square and took it to Maple Hill in the Confederate cemetery. Just 2 blocks from a Nazi building named after a Nazi.
I'm not saying celebrate it, but don't forget. That's all I'm trying to say.
It's ironic. I can't say it. I can't even talk about it without laughing. Like y'all just walk by the Von Braun Center to get to this statue, tear it down.
Wow.
It's insane. I think it's funny. Huntsville's full of funny stuff like that because it was made by the Redstone rocket, which is the same rocket that bombed London. We just renamed it. That's the Redstone rocket was named after Redstone. Redstone was called Redstone before that.
Yeah, that's one thing I actually forgot about when I visited Huntsville. I mean, I completely forgot about that big facility out there, that Huntsville rocket facility out there. What do they call that?
Rocket Center, Space and Rocket Center.
Yeah, it's in Huntsville right there, and it's all the different rockets out there, and you can actually go and you can visit it. It's
Space and Rocket Center.
Yeah.
Drive by it every morning.
Yeah. And we were leaving. I go, oh wow, look at that. If I'd remembered my history and everything, I would have said we would have made some time to go inside there because I've always been into astronomy and space travel and stuff like that too, which I think is it does have some purpose.
They have an SR-71 Blackbird out front too.
Oh wow, do they really?
And nobody appreciates it. I'm like, dude, there is a literal. I'm like, why are you worried about the Saturn V? You can see it from the road.
Yeah,
I go every time I go there. I'm like, what have you seen? You've been over Area 51. I know you have.
Yeah.
Well, Dale, let me. I guess we'll bring it to a close. I had one more question for you. I wanted to know about your actual sensitivity to seeing ghosts. Or are you an empath or anything? Or are you just an enthusiast? No,
I mean, I think everybody is psychic to some extent. I mean, basically, especially if you've done it as long as I have, you kind of gain maybe a bit more sensitivity because you're more open to that possibility than, say, a skeptic or an agnostic or an atheist or somebody that has no belief whatsoever would have in the field. I keep a very open mind, but because I think I've seen my share of spirits through shadow images, and I've videotaped and audio taped different things that I think is very significant of what I do. But I think because I'm around areas like that are have a robust, belief, style of, spirits and so forth, you gain a sensitivity. I think it kind of like rubs off on you, so to speak. So, I'm an enthusiast, mostly researcher, investigator, but I also, I do believe that I am a little sensitive. I'm not like, a full-blown psychic or a clairvoyant or something, but I'll know if I can walk into a room and, I would say the best piece of equipment is your own human body.
Yeah,
you can hear things, you can see things, you can smell things, you can feel your hair stand up on your back of your neck, you can feel goosebumps. And in some cases, in one case, I was actually able to taste something, which I thought was really, really unusual. Very quickly, I was in a hospital. We were in a location. I was there with an RN, and suddenly I started to taste a metallic taste in my mouth. I go, it's really kind of strangest taste I ever had. And she says, metallic? She goes, that's blood, because blood sort of has a metallic taste. And I said, here I'm in the hospital. It makes perfect sense. But I always told people in the past that you could never taste a ghost. Well, now maybe you can taste a ghost, so you can taste something in the air or something in the environment. So I think, again, like you said, once you get around to doing this as much as me, I think you gain a sensitivity to it, and you become more open, more perceptive.
It's almost like a not as aggressive of a hitchhiker effect.
Right.
It's like it's like you have just like a hitchhiker, like a sixth sense almost. You say you're tasting the blood. A lot of people think that the Bigfoot smell is telepathic instead of an actual smell, because kind of like a warning to the person: stay back, stay back.
Oh, that very bad smell that people
the skunk,
smell.
the skunk BO smell.
Yeah.
Because I've heard.
Hope I never smell that.
Yeah. Well, I kind of want to, but I kind of want to see a ghost, but not in my own house. So it's the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've heard people say one person smells it and the person next to them doesn't.
Oh yeah, I mean that happens a lot, and that's really the way people perceive or their openness. I mean, it's like turning off a light switch. If you go into a building and you say, "Well, everything I see on the corner of my eye, it's just nothing, and there's nothing here," that's like flipping off a light switch. You're probably never going to see anything. So that's why I tell people, if you want to see something and there's nothing to be afraid of, they're not going to harm you. I've never come across any cases of anybody being harmed. Just keep an open mind. You don't have to be a steadfast believer to just say, hey, maybe that was something, or maybe, hey, that way you'll have a lot more experiences, perhaps. If you want to have experiences, that is. If you don't want to have experiences, then just turn your mind off, and you probably won't have any experience. I think it has a lot to do with what's up here.
I have a hard time when I go into it, because I go to Savannah quasi regularly. I really love it down there. You can feel it. You can feel it's like 700 years old. And I have a hard time when I go into a place like these haunted places. I just automatically start off scared. I'm like, why can't I get over that? Like, I know that's what's turning them off, because my wife goes in, she's cool with it. She'll see like glimpses of Civil War soldiers.
Oh wow!
Sitting on, yeah, she saw. I was in a room one time. A guy had his little $1 Zach Bagan K2, sitting down next to him. Why don't you sit next to us? And doing the thing, the thing. And he can't. And I walked back out, and my wife's like, I just saw a Civil War soldier for like 2 seconds on that couch. I'm like, that dude was just talking to it. And I was ready to go, but she was like, I want to stay. I'm like, I'm got the boo-boo jeebies. But I think if I did it now, like, I want to go back. The Sorrel Weed House, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. The curator told me Zach Bagan had a fake possession down there, so it just lends more credence to the actual place to me.
Yeah. Well, I know that we're planning on doing things, hopefully either maybe not this year, but I know for next year for sure we're planning on doing things in South Carolina, Georgia, and then maybe even parts of southern Tennessee. So I don't know where you guys are located at, but I mean, if you guys want to tag along with it, we'd love to have you.
Yeah. So you know where we're at. We're in Huntsville.
We're in Huntsville.
Oh, you're in Huntsville. So
yeah, I got a Huntsville address.
Yeah.
I'm 20 minutes from the Tennessee line.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because the county, you got Madison County does this, and the county above us is Lincoln County, Tennessee. I had the host. It's the Elk River runs through. It's called the Elk Valley. The Elk Valley Paranormal Society is like 20 minutes away. I told her, I said, if I'd known you were right there, we'd have met up at a gas station and did this.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Like, it takes longer to connect the internet than it does to do. I'm going to go. Their home base is the old South Pittsburgh or the old Fayetteville, Tennessee, Lincoln County Hospital. That's why I was asking you about that. And they're the ones that run the main tours through there, and it is eat up. But
Yeah,
I'm gonna start going up there and doing a tour with them sooner or later.
Yeah, we've investigated that old South Pittsburgh hospital, quite a number of times, and we got some really crazy stuff out of there.
Yeah, South Pittsburgh's over above where I grew up. I grew up just about 50 miles east. South Pittsburgh's right above that town, and Fayetteville's right above Huntsville.
Yeah.
So I used to go and buy beer in South Pittsburgh when I was in high school because they didn't check. I'd be up there all the time.
We had a chance to get into Hales Bar Marina, which is over not too far from South Pittsburgh over there, and we just took a kind of a ghost tour through there. They actually allow you to do ghost investigations for small groups, actually, 5-6 people or something like that. So, I'm hoping to get back down there to do something. And every single time I've tried to get into the Bell Witch, the Bell Witch Cave, it's always closed. I mean, they've been closed ever since COVID, and I don't know if they're ever going to open up. I was down there back in the 1980s when long before they had it all roped off and chained off and the way it is now. And I know COVID hit them pretty hard, I guess, over there. So every time I call, all I get is a recorded message that's saying it's closed right now. Try back later or something like that. I know they don't allow investigations in there, but just to go into the cave would be pretty cool.
I want to do some recon. Didn't Kate go there like 2 years ago?
I'm not sure.
I think she went. I don't know. Well, all right, Dale. I really appreciate you being on. I love the paranormal societies. I used to think Bigfoot was my favorite subject. Paranormal society is catching up. It's like the last lap of a race. Because I guess it's because you got a lot more evidence. You guys come.
Compelling.
Yeah, they come heavy-handed. The Bigfoot guys are just really passionate about what they saw. The ghost hunting guys have tapes, and their particular entity doesn't ruin all their equipment up on site. It's just destroyed. It's like an EMP goes off in the woods. I can't imagine. All right, thanks everybody for watching. Thanks Dale, and thanks for coming on telling your stories. That was pretty cool. I like the history element with the ghost all day. That's better than a drug to me. I swear. Thanks for watching, folks.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
I never didn't believe in Bigfoot. I never believed in it, I didn't believe in it. I never gave it any thought.
They kept wood knocking back and forth to each other, and it was in a pattern.
Barn owls don't typically throw rocks.
I come across these tracks.
Sasquatch is still not on my mind.